Okay, cool. So I'm gonna share my screen now and we're gonna get into this PowerPoint. All right, so what is climate change and what does it have to do with race? It's for Interfaces' Artist On series, and it's inspired by Susana Almanza, who is an organizer with this organization called Poder. So first, I just want to give you all just a little overview of what's going to happen up in this workshop. We're going to do some check-ins. Since I was expecting a smaller crowd, we might as well just like kind of get to know each other. Going to go over some shared definitions, going to go over history, questions, moving toward an equitable society, a climate equitable society, then do some writing and a checkout. So a couple of guidelines for this workshop. I just want you all to just be like cognizant of these things as we continue. First, being text-based leaves space. If you've spoken, maybe wait like 5 or so minutes before speaking again, because we want to hear from everyone, especially with this being a smaller workshop. Second, please try to be as present as possible. I know we got pets and people we're taking care of and food to eat and all of the things, but I love questions. I love listening just to listen and not listening to respond. So try to be as present as you can. But I will not, like tick mark you or whatever if you gotta go get a sandwich. This is a school. Speak up, not over, just respect others when they are talking. Zoom calls can get real chaotic if a lot of people are trying to talk at the same time. Upon like entering, I think it like automatically muted y'all, but if you want to talk, please unmute. If you're not talking, please mute so we can just like, the air quality can just be as clear as possible. Use I statements, no generalizations, refrain from disposability, no personal attacks. Know that no one knows everything, even me. Be open to education, be open to being wrong, challenging your views and the views of others through respectful conversation. By respectful, I mean like, hey, you are, unintelligent because you don't know this specific thing about watersheds or whatever. No isms or phobias, please. No devil's advocate or evading the topic at hand. So like a lot of times when I talk about race, people are like, what about gender? What about sexuality? Let's just like focus on this thing, y'all, and know that everything is connected. Let's just start with that like baseline thing. So I'm not like neglecting gender because I am talking about race. So cool. So a couple of definitions I'm gonna use throughout. Just so you know them, and we don't have to like stop for questions about that. If we do, it's fine, but just like a couple of definitions. But by POC, I use the by POC acronym. That's Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color. Racism, by racism, I mean institutional, social, and mental oppression based on race, the misuse of institutional, social, and financial capital in order to oppress someone based on race. A system of oppression that knowingly or unknowingly exploits or controls people of color in order to maintain white supremacy, a collective gaslighting of people of color, sometimes used under the guise of cultural norms. When I say anti-Black racism, I mean the ongoing and often physically, mentally violent process. Wait, LOL. When I say anti-Black racism, I mean racism that's specific to Black people. And when I say colonization, I mean the ongoing and often physically, mentally violent processes of which a central system of power, aka the USA, dominates the land and original inhabitants of that land. So cool, gonna use these words a whole lot. Hopefully we get comfortable with them as time goes on. Also, OMG, my manners are terrible. I forgot to like say some like Zoom 101. Love a chat, so we're probably gonna use the chat function. Just in case, I don't get to your question immediately, please just pop it in the chat. I don't have any restrictions on it or whatever. If you want to send something to the chat, like specifically to me, you can change that. If you go to chat, which is like, for me, I'm on a computer, it's like all the way on the right-hand side under more, then chat. And then when you do to, it automatically is everyone, but you can just do, like me or whoever you want to chat. Yeah, so those are some definitions. Let's just move on now to some check-ins. I would love to know everyone's name, everyone's pronouns, everyone's connection to one of these three things: climate change, race, or creative writing, and what you're hoping to get out of today. I'll start. and then hopefully everyone will feel comfortable saying the things. Also, just know a lot of gifts are going to be in this presentation. I put a lot of gifts in my presentations generally. Name KB, pronouns they, them. My connection to climate change is I'm currently a community climate ambassador with the Austin Office of Sustainability. With race, I'm a Black person in America. With creative writing, I'm a poet, so I do a lot of it. I'm hoping to learn some stuff from y'all as well as try out this new presentation. Yeah, does anyone want to go first or second after me?
I don't mind going. Hey everyone, I'm Sweetgo, they, them. Climate change, I just want to learn more about it. I feel like I like to learn from people versus things. So just getting people's opinions about it and getting different ideas. So that's my connection to it. I'm still learning. Race, Indigenous Latinx is kind of my definition of it. And creative writing, I started writing at the end of last year, 2019. So I'm kind of growing with my creative writing, poems, short stories, and translating like Indigenous stories into Spanish and English translations accurately. So that's kind of been my journey with it. Thank you.
Yay, love that. Love that you're here. Thank you so much for bravely going second. Does anyone want to go next?
I can go. I'm Gabby, she, hers, good. I teach environmental education that's like place-based, so it's like connects to sort of like climate as it's happening very locally. And then, yeah, we all live in a world where we're experiencing it every day. Latinx heritage, and I do write, creatively, but not necessarily so much about climate. So kind of interested about that piece. And yeah, always just trying to participate and engage in this conversation. So happy you're doing this.
Yay, claps, claps, claps. So happy to have you here. Anyone want to go next?
Hi, I'm Liz, she, her pronouns. Let's see, connection to climate. I am from Southwest Louisiana, which is like disproportionately affected by certain aspects of climate change. It's like Cancer Alley, and one of the like most at risk for losing marshlands, which a lot of people don't realize. And ethnicity is Cajun / white. And what I'm hoping to get out of today is, I just like, I'm always happy to have like conversations about this topic, which is like really important to me, and the place that I'm from. And I would love to learn what KB has to say about it. So yeah, thanks for doing this.
Yay, 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 Liz is here, amazing. Thanks so much for coming. Anyone want to go next?
I can go. My name, I go by Soups, like the food. Pronouns they, them. My connection to climate change is just that I care a lot about it and would really like to see us change our habits, us being humans. Race, I am mixed race. My dad's Jamaican, my mother is white. In creative writing, I write a lot of poems and essays. And what I wanted today, I can already tell I'm going to get, which is just like community around this topic.
Yay, so glad you're here, Soups. OMG. Soups is also one of our workshop facilitators at a later date, which I'll talk about a little later. Yeah, I think Nieves, that just leaves you. You can or can't go, no pressure. Okay, cool. So we're gonna move on just out of the interest of time. So what is climate change, right? So a lot of people like don't even know what it is. But we have this like fear of an unknown. So I want to just like give us a concrete definition to work with, so we can move forward as a unit. So climate change is a broad range of global phenomena created predominantly by burning fossil fuels, which add heat trapping gases to the Earth's atmosphere, which is a like mouthful. So I'll just like break it down even a little bit more than that. So climate change can show itself in a myriad of ways. First, sea level rise, ice mass loss and glaciers, shifts in flower or plant blooming, extreme weather, which can result in low or poor mood, wildfires, droughts, hurricanes, etc. Anyone ever just been like pissed because it's hot outside? Because I have. That is climate change. And a whole bunch of other things, but I just gave you like a short list here. So these are just some predictions that some experts have given as it relates to weather and climate change specifically. So days with maximum temperature above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. 2011 to 2040 is where we are. 1971 to 2000 is where we were, but just like so many days, OMG, like we're already at pretty much like this range in Texas specifically. And it's expected to go up and up due to climate change. And then nights with minimum temperature below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, again, expected to kind of go up or have a higher scenario. So those are a couple things. And then what does climate change have to do with race, which is like the whole like idea of what we're doing today? The short answer is, y'all, everything. Data shows time and time again that the populations that are most affected by climate change are always communities of color, especially those that are Black and Indigenous due to pipelines and anti-Black racism. I want to go into, just in case you don't believe me, a couple of examples and give this fact some context. So as of 2017, Austin, Texas was one of the best places to live in the US by the US News and World Report. Contrastingly so, the population change by race has been very interesting to see. For instance, right now, based on the latest US Census data, the white population has changed 442%, which is like a boom of white people in Austin. But then you have no data for Asian American folks right now. Latinx folks, negative 33%, Black folks, negative 60%. Is that just an accident? Let's get into it. Then you have Austin, Texas in comparison to some other close by places, right? And this is specific to Black population growth versus general population growth. So Austin is doing really great as far as getting more people here. I don't know about y'all, but I see a different U-Haul almost every day. Like people are moving here in groves. So that change has changed by like about 20.4% out of this 10-year range here. But why has the Black population grown negative 5%? Why is that? Right? And for every single comparable city, it's like growing along with the population. So what's happening in Austin specifically? Let's talk about it. Then you have median family income by tract. And this, unfortunately, is a little blurry, but this is the Austin Round Rock area as of 2014, and this is just different counties in Austin. Essentially, what I want us to get is like lower family income is for some reason also synonymous with like specific places, you know, East Austin, West Austin, et cetera, and so on and so forth. And then we have things like this, which is just like a picture in Austin, where you have these complexes being built, you know, new one every day, or new structures next to kind of historic homes. And then I think this is the last kind of thing to put everything into perspective. Austin's traffic is now considered worse than New York City. 41 hours average is time stuck in traffic. I don't know if y'all have ever been in traffic around 5 p.m., but it is infuriating. I'm always trying to leave work around like 4 or really like 3:45 just to kind of like not deal with it. Now I want to get into a little bit of racial and climate history of Austin. That was just some examples, but now I'm going like point by point. So it all started when Christopher Columbus set foot on these lands, which could be a sentence like that could be copied and pasted into most of the problems in the world, but I'm gonna just talk specifically about climate change and racism. So you have slave trade from Africa to the Americas from 1650 to 1860. You have Central America, West Indies, North America, South America, Africa, all slave trade shit happening. And then you have much, much, much down the line, or maybe not much down the line, actually. 1868, the 14th Amendment happens, right? Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. When I was in grade school, I learned the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, I think, through like free citizens vote. So this is supposed to be the amendment that like ends racism or whatever. Because it was in between 1861 through 1865, which is the Civil War. One of the big problems in the Civil War was like, Southern people was like, I need my slaves, bro, or whatever. So then you got the 14th Amendment that happens, whatever. So good old Austin, or Congress, let's start there. Congress passed the Standard State Zoning Enabling Act, which cleared essentially the path for further segregation and environmental racism. Let's just look at this room right here. They snapped a good old pic to commemorate the time. What does this room consist of? Oh, I don't know, just like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 white dudes. So that very much shows in the laws that were passed during this time. Then you have the city of Austin specifically doing land grabs under the guise of zoning and planning. So in 1928, the city of Austin passed this Yes Master Plan, which relocated Black and Mexican populations along with industries to East Austin. In 1990, the City of Austin Smart Growth Initiative designates East Austin as a desired development zone. So essentially it's like, OMG, please like develop new stuff in East Austin because it is so desirable to incoming contractors and things like that. A little bit more though, specifically about the Yes Master Plan. So this plan makes certain areas in town desirable and making others undesirable. The plan cites the fact that any zoning laws used for the purposes of segregation would be deemed unconstitutional. The planners recognized that the Black population was present in small communities everywhere in the city, including Wheatsville, Pleasant Hill, and Clarksville, but not the areas just east of East Avenue and south of the city cemetery. This area had an all-Negro population, according to this law. So the recommendation of the plan was to place all Black families in the already Black populated East Side, and later the Mexican American community would relocate to East Austin. So that's a little bit of the master plan that was drafted in 1928 in Austin. So most of Austin's gentrification is the direct consequence of the city segregation. First through separate but equal city plans. The 27 Jim Crow laws. Also, I should give that some context. Jim Crow laws, right? If we're not familiar with those, are all things happening up until like the 1960s, 1920s to 1960s, very, very roughly. The 27 Jim Crow laws passed in Texas, the public housing legislation, and also through the disenfranchisement of people of color voice in city and state politics. Both UT Austin, and the Austin Independent School District fought against integration for a very long time, even after it was unconstitutional to do so. And Gabby adds, the city also stopped utilities to those communities if they weren't living in those areas so that they be forced to move. It's also like a underlying like violent way to make people move. Heman Sweat, LOL. So UT actually has an entity, a center for Black men now, named after Heman Sweat. But Heman Sweat was the first ever Black student at the Texas Law School. And mind you, that's 1950. I have like relatives that were alive during this time. So the Wheatsfield School, just moving on. The Wheatsfield School was built by Travis County in the late 1870s at the northwest corner of Longview and 25th Streets. After serving for decades as one of the country's several schools for Black children, the building was moved in 1933 to the Rosewood School site, where it was used as a temporary school and lunchroom. This photo of a class was taken around 1907. So all of these young Black children here. And this photo is courtesy of the Carver Museum. So school segregation. And a couple of more tidbits on education on a national level as well as on a city of Austin level. 1955, Supreme Court decision of Brown versus Board of Education was supposed to be the transition to a racially non-discriminatory school system. But you see, Austin was just like, nah, B, we are actually not listening to that. So for about 15 years, they were just like, JK, we're not doing that. But in 1970, the US government filed suit to eliminate racial discrimination at AISD, 15 years after Brown v. Board of Education. So it's like the government had to sue them for them to like actually, you know, go through with having non-discriminatory school systems. The AISD continued to appeal, and appealing this decision costs money. So think of like, hey, we're taking away money from city resources and putting it to appealing, you know, being racist. Like, because we want to be racist so bad, essentially. In 1978, the Court of Appeals holds AISD discriminatory. Then you got 1983, the court declares AISD a unitary system, 29 years after Brown and after 13 years of litigation. So essentially they were appealing this shit for 13 years. Just like, so we know the magnitude of like how committed to racism this city that we all occupy was. 13 years of litigation, y'all. And the long-term educational impacts of this discriminatory system can still be seen today. And that can be seen in like not enough resources being allotted to Black and Brown schools. And certain schools being closed and certain schools not being closed. It's all very strategic. Then you have like housing segregation. So Rosewood Courts, which is still a like public housing unit to this day, I believe, was made specifically to house Black people. And then you have the history of Republic Square, which is what we call it today, which is close to downtown. It was actually first known as Mexican Square. So there's a thing, other like, you know, discriminations based on race. And you can see this is like in Austin History Center if you ever want to visit that. And also I'm happy to like give y'all these PowerPoints after this presentation. And then you have Santa Rita courts, LOL. And those were made specifically to house Mexican Americans, pretty much anyone that like crossed Hispanic on the US Census. This was like courts made specifically to house those folks in Austin. And then you got Hyde Park, which is still a thing to this day. This is again an archive from the Austin History Center. But you see this? Hyde Park is strictly for white people. Just like blatantly saying that, you know? And this is from, I believe, 19 something? No, I lied. Is it 1898 there? But like 1800s, 1900s. And then would love to move on. Hold on. Yeah. I believe it. Hyde Park is still a very like white space in Austin. 1957 happens this industrial development. So we have industrial zoning now in East Austin again. So under cumulative zoning, residential homes could be built on land owned industrial. Cumulative zoning allowed polluting and hazardous facilities to be built adjacent to homes and schools in East Austin. So now, after we know a couple of like Austin's racial tidbits, then we start to think about climate history. So all of this cumulative zoning essentially means like we're about to build power plants, but we only want to build them in East Austin. Even in this thing in 1957, cumulative zoning was not allowed in West Austin, but for some reason it was allowed in East Austin. So then we move on. This is a picture in an archive, Airport and Springdale Road, which we know is on the east side. If you've like went over there, there's like Springdale General, this big like development over there now. But this is a picture of someone's house, someone's kids playing outside, and you see the backdrop is this like major plant. So like their air polluted is is an understatement. So 6 major oil companies located at this tank farm site. Then you have the Holly Street Power Plant. This was the largest stationary source of NOx emissions. So it came over there, or the process to get it over there happened in 1957. Holly Street on the east side. It took until 2017, so that's 50 years, roughly, for this plant to be officially decommissioned. And decommission means like, hey, we're no longer trying to use this plant. 50 years. And it took a lot of organizing by organizations like PODER and other climate equity focused organizations for that to happen. But yeah. Then moving on, you have this gas company right on East 5th. You have the 1956 Highway Act, which if you've ever just hung out with me for maybe more than 10 minutes, I always talk about how I-35 is racist. And sometimes I'm playing, but actually right now I am very serious. So the 1956 Highway Act was put in place to segregate and displace communities of color. Austin's Highway 35 created the clearest physical barrier between East Austin and the rest of the city, which deepens racial segregation, which also makes the city pretty impossible to like have good public transit. Yeah, I could harp on that for years, but I-35 is racist if you didn't know it, y'all. According to a UT study, moving on. According to a UT study, area residents in single family homes in this East Cesar Chavez neighborhood, which was a plan by the city to make East Cesar Chavez more desirable. So like all of the East Cesar Chavez stuff that we know about is because like of this design. Located adjacent to downtown and central Eastern Austin, Texas, it's a stable mixed-use area characterized by strong family values and a culturally diverse and rich Hispanic history. So essentially, the East Cesar Chavez neighborhood was made a thing. 1999 is here, neighborhood plan. But residents that were already there experienced over a 400+ increase in land value and 123% increase in their tax bill from 1998 to 2004. So this, if you've ever been in East Cesar Chavez, opened the floodgates to gentrification, 100%. Because all of a sudden Austin was marketing this area as, the new place to be and making the property value go extremely up, which makes, the folks that were there completely displaced. If they can't pay to stay there, they have to leave. And then you have the East Riverside development. So then city envisions making the corridor more attractive and walkable, which, all right. What do you mean by attractive? You know what I mean? With mixed-use projects, wider sidewalks, and limits on drive-through businesses. So City Council adopted the East Riverside Corridor Master Plan, over 1,700 low-income and working poor. And poor is always synonymous in the city with people of color. Were displaced to make room for new, higher density, high-class wage earners. Another plan. And you have folks, and it's really heartbreaking actually, You have folks in East Riverside corridor, not even asking them not to like go through with this plan, but just asking for more time to relocate. They didn't have time. It was essentially just like, hey, you gotta leave. We're increasing your rent. You gotta go. Moving on. West Austin was protected from all of this like neighborhood revitalization BS by the designation of drinking water protection zone. It's like, hey, this is where we get our like drinking water or whatever. So we can't mess with this place. Drinking water protection zone, desired development zone, urban desired development zone, and then Austin city limits. And then you have things like smart growth incentives, which is a thing put in place not too long ago to give incoming builders, incoming businesses initiative to like grow in the desired development zone, which is East Austin. So the city went so far as to like reduce certain fees for all new projects, fee waivers, infrastructure developments, all of those things, so people can build in this desired development zone without any input from the community at all, to the detriment of the community, making it more desirable to move in new things. And then you have population changes. The result of all of these, racial and climate inequities leads inevitably to changing the landscape of East Austin. So you have Black population concentrations, 1990s versus 2000, based on the census. And then you have changing Black landscape, Eastern core, from the 2000s to the 2010s. Continuously going down into the negatives even. And then you have changing Hispanic landscape. Unfortunately, like Hispanic is like what's put on censuses and things. This is 2000 versus 2010. Again, East Austin. All of these graphics are actually taken from the City of Austin Equity Office. I should probably say that. The Equity Office is still fairly new, came in like about 2016, but I'm happy again to share these with you so you can look at them more closely. But essentially, I want to drive home the fact, y'all, that Austin has always been racially segregated. East Austin was created by legal segregation as a space for non-white people. Communities of color flourished in East Austin for many years. Specifically, Black and Latinx populations were known to live there. And it's always been mixed racially and economically, and predominantly inhabited by people of color until recently. As we can see, 1990s, things started to change. And then you have things, climate things like Onion Creek floods. I want to just, like the Onion Creek flood, sorry. I want to just play this video provided by the Austin American Statesman, which gives a little bit of context about Onion Creek flooding, which is a specific area in Austin. Cool. So just a little bit of context about Onion Creek flooding. We see the demographics, you know, of those people outside living in places susceptible to flooding that have flooded again and again and again, and for some reason, like homes keep getting built there. So just a thing to put into perspective. And here's just like a picture from the 2013 flooding, which is when the worst of it kind of happened. To this day, there's still a Facebook page specific to helping victims of the Onion Creek flood from 2013 help each other and return lost items to their owners. And then a couple of estimates by race and ethnicity for how much people earn in Austin specifically. White households, Asian households, Black and African American households, Latinx households there. Oof, I didn't mean to move so quickly. But another graphic to kind of bring home family income by ethnicity. So when we say poor communities, those are always synonymous with communities of color, historically have been in this city we call Austin. So white families, this is from like 10 years ago, so last census. White families make about 70K a year, 35K, 36K, 60K. That brings the average to 54K, and to like someone outsider looking in, which is probably the one that we know the most, like, oh, Austin people are well off because everyone there makes around 54K. No, the disparities are pretty vast. And then you have associations and corporations and things that are pretty much the obliterators and the enemies of communities of colors here in Austin. Austin Chamber of Commerce, got to get them big businesses here. Austin Board of Realtors, got to get these new homes built. Real Estate Council of Austin, Home Builders Association of Greater Austin, so on and so forth. Instead of these names, I would honestly just say, why don't you just name yourself the enemy of communities of color at this point? So now I want to get into climate equity. Climate equity is a practice that ensures that all people have the opportunity to benefit equally from climate solutions, and no one community takes on unequal burdens of climate impacts. Essentially promoting we're all in this together rhetoric around climate change. And thinking about solutions that work for everyone and not only just work for, you know, like one specific demographic of people. So I want to hear from y'all a little bit about Austin and the greater world's current solutions to climate change. I'll show you a couple, and then I would love to just like blurt out some that we may know. So Austin, you know, over the last 5 years has been like, okay, we've been kind of tripping over the last 500 years or whatever. So we're going to try to right some of our wrongs. So Austin's recent energy quest brings solar power to renters, specifically the less wealthy. So incentive programs, that's as of 2017. Then you have affordable for sale homes, available for households with income at or below 80% Austin median family income. These homes will be a part of each development phase and integrated into the community. Things like that. As of March 2007, the 80% MFI in Austin Round Rock for a family of 2 is $45,500, and for a family of 4 is $56,900. So trying to make affordable for sale and for rent homes for low-income folks. And then you got the City of Austin Sustainability Office, which is still a little baby in comparison to other offices in Austin. But they have been doing, and I'm not even just saying that because they're helping us out with this project, they have been doing some really amazing work. So they work with the equity office pretty regularly to make sure that we're promoting climate equity on a city level. They have plans to update the sustainability plan every 5 years. They're one in 2015, they've like admitted like, okay, with this one, we probably missed the mark. This was their first ever like climate plan as a sustainability office. And with this new plan that's coming out in 2020, they've created initiatives such as the Community Climate Ambassador Program, which Interfaces is a part of, created 5 different initiatives, and then created separate steering communities and advisory groups for those different initiatives. And all of those meetings are open to anyone that requests to join, by the way. All of these things are helping culminate the new sustainability plan that's supposed to come out this year. So learning from our mistakes, at least a little bit. And then they also have workshops open to the public. I recently went to one of their sustainable building workshops, and it was very like conversation based and very much like updating the city and participants on what the city is doing to combat climate change. So just a couple of things I thought about though on an Austin and worldwide level of things that people say like, oh, this combats climate change. Very long list, but these are just a couple of things that I thought of. So the plastic bag initiative, everyone knows, you know, like grocery stores in Austin promote bringing reusable bags and things like that. Recycling, thrifting because of production of new clothes has some very negative climate effects. Reducing water usage, walking, using public transit, or using electric cars, composting, using less plastic, using less energy, building sustainably designed buildings, which means like sunroofs and things like that. A lot of glass, just like creating more natural light. Shop or gardening locally for food, lowering consumption, voting, and consumption being like new things that we get. Voting for sustainable initiatives, so like going to the ballot box to be sustainable or whatever, and preparing better for natural disasters. And then reforestation, so rebuilding forests that have been obliterated to make new buildings. But I couldn't help to think like, what else? What am I forgetting here as far as solutions to climate change? Does anyone have anything that's not on this list?
You know, specifically in thinking about like some of these situations and climate change, you know, I feel like a lot of the times, like indigenous peoples who are constantly living on the land, off the land, and the ways that we preserve it and continue to preserve it, I feel like are ignored. And when people, I guess like getting like a collective together of people who constantly use natural resources and how to continue to conserve them. Like for example, when you were talking about, I knew about the Onion Creek flooding, but I didn't know how like consecutive it was and like how far back it was going. And being somebody who grew up in an area where water was one of our main resources, and we live near a river, like a main river in that area, and we co-use it with other indigenous peoples, we would never build like permanent land buildings or like permanent structures near the water, because we know the way that the river fluctuates and it floods. And for me, I'm thinking like, was that more they didn't care and they just wanted to get as many people in that area as they could, or was it because they didn't have that knowledge of the way the river flows, in the sense that, you know, it can flood, you know? So just me thinking about that, my first initial thought was, you know, you don't build land structures, you don't build permanent structures around a river, so close to the river like that. So like just these ideas and getting, you know, ideas or having collectives with people who do live off the land naturally. I don't know, that's just a thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And even in that video, you can see like, oh, a flood happened. Oh, we're just gonna rebuild houses. Oh, a flood happened. Oh, we're just gonna, like, it was just very cyclical. And even continues to be cyclical. So not building permanent structures near water, specifically the Onion Creek at this point, feels intuitive. And I'm a proponent of like, it's not that people don't know. It's that money matters more than people sometimes, unfortunately. But yeah, listening to folks that have for centuries and centuries used practices to preserve land, probably yes, is a very good idea on a climate level. Is there anything else that thank you so much for that input. Is there anything else that I'm missing on this list, y'all?
I know so I live in very North Austin, like incredibly North Austin. And there's like a small push for like backyard gardens, just to help like, cause like with shade, you get lower electricity bills and stuff like that. And then because a lot of like the food resources in Austin for like lower income is very south. And so there's like a group of people teaching people how to garden in their backyards or like in empty plots up here, which was like your point number 10, but just a little bit of an expansion on it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think gardening classes are so cute and so needed. Are they accessible to Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color? That's a thing to look into, definitely. But yeah, thank you for expanding that. So shopping local at things like farmers markets, which for the city of Austin are definitely more south. And then gardening on your own food, if possible, is definitely a solution. Anything else that I'm missing, y'all?
I would also include just like land management practices, like specific to agriculture and also like farming, or like, I guess, husbandry, like animal farming, basically. Like those, depending on how the land is used, that can be like a huge, basically, yeah, like contributor, or can actually help mitigate like climate impact. And then also, like, unfortunately, just like the meat industry is also like a huge contributor, like basically like the meat industry as well as like our oil and gas industries, like are major contributors to climate change. And so yeah, also like taking that into consideration, I guess, when like making choices, although I definitely like don't believe that it's on the consumer to like be responsible for that. It's really has to do with these industries and the way that they operate. Yeah, and also just going along with building like sustainable buildings, also just like development in general, like basically the less I don't know, the less like green space you have, the like temperature's just going to rise on a local level and on like a broader level than that too.
Yeah, absolutely. More on sustainable buildings to come a little bit later. I love what you said, Gabby, about not putting it on the individual, which if you can't tell, a lot of these like solutions that we've been given have been like very individualistic. Like you need to recycle more, you need to not use plastic bags, you need to get some kind of like external composting unit because your complex doesn't have composting. You need to, like eat less meat, all of the things. But what about meat plants? What about gas plants? What about all of these things that are continuing to be built in communities? Where's the accountability around there? Definitely something to think about. Thank you. And I want to ask very transparently, y'all, what do y'all feel like stops Black people, Indigenous people, and people of color from adhering to or taking advantage of these solutions that we just talked about? Okay.
I wanted to give someone else space to talk first. But definitely like accessibility not only to information, but to resources. I feel like a lot of the times when I go to spaces and talking about, this topic, the way that it's advertised is very like white. And then a lot of the times the way that things are translated into Spanish really matters. And other languages too, because you can tell when it was translated by somebody who speaks the language versus they just use a Google Translate, right? And I've noticed that when I see things in Spanish, me personally, I'm less likely to go, because I'm like, if they can't even translate to Spanish correctly, like, is this space really for us? And if I think like that as somebody who's, wants to go to these things, much less for other people in the community who are less amped about it, are going to want to go because they can tell, like, is this space even for me, when the flyer itself isn't even written accurately in Spanish specifically. And then also, like, access to some of these resources, the way that they're put is like in other areas outside of our communities, like specifically Runberg, like there's like very few resources here. Like, I have to go out of this space, out of my own personal space, to get resources or to get the information that I need for these kinds of things.
Yeah, that brings up a lot of different topics. Thank you. Like accessibility only being in like a specific part of the city, definitely. Translations, universal design. Does this space even feel like it's designed for me? A lot of the times, no. Honestly, not even gonna lie. Before I moved here and before I just became like very aware of climate change, I kind of just always saw white people at the forefront of those conversations. So I was just like, yeah, the world is gonna die or whatever, but like, why should I care? It seems like this is a white people issue, low key. So it's all about like, do I even feel like I have access to the room? Absolutely. Thank you. Is there any other things that we're not thinking about? What stops BIPOC from even considering these current solutions?
This is like something that I just kind of recently learned about within Austin, but like the Del Val area is like sort of a food desert within Austin. So it's like a lot of, these suggestions are based on the idea of like making more sustainable food choices, like choosing more like produce and fresh vegetables. But like if you don't have access to a grocery store in your community, or you have to like drive 10 miles to the nearest one, like that's going to prevent a lot of people. And like there was, before the pandemic happened, there was like going to be a protest, which is like unfortunately postponed, but like because HEB has actually purchased land to make a grocery store and they keep promising to open one, but they've yet to do so for like several years. And they keep opening new locations in like already affluent areas of Austin. So like when there's no like financial incentive for these companies to like do the right thing and provide services to like certain parts of the city, then these problems keep getting like compounded, right? So I thought that was like worth bringing up.
100%. And food deserts almost always are in communities of color. So if the choices are drive 10 miles to the nearest HEB or Walmart, or go to McDonald's, which is literally less than a mile away, obviously someone is more often than not going to choose the latter and going to choose the former for like a special occasion or something. You know what I mean? And in food deserts, it feels just very targeted that all of these fast food places are so abundant, but like grocery stores are like far and few between. Yeah, and that's definitely a thing that impacts BIPOC. So I wanted to just like list out a couple of things that I thought about when I talk to people about climate solutions. These are the things that I hear. Money. So saying go get an electric car feels very ridiculous because electric cars are not in any way colonization and trauma history. Sorry, I'm just not looking at this chat. But electric cars are not in any way accessible. And has anyone in here really for real tried to use public transit? it kind of sucks, bro. like people, like the buses will come late or like not come at all. And the routes are maybe a little questionable. All of those things. Water consumptions. I'm gonna take a pause just to like look at the chat right quick. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I went to a HEB recently in East Austin, and it was so much like over frosted stuff in the food section, so much like produce that wasn't good anymore. So even like the quality of food, even if you do have a grocery store, is like less so. So yeah, absolutely. And the time to travel is a really big barrier for a lot of people. Because if it's more time to travel, it's more like time on this fucking terrible ass public transit. And then you got voter suppression. So if you're a proponent of like the solution is to vote, it's no way to vote online. Voting by mail is questionable. Voting via phone. I've heard a couple of folks have some problems with that as well. And like in this global pandemic, who knows what voting is about to look like? Probably even harder to do. Then you have a lack of inclusion in even determining these solutions. So when we think about the solutions that we just named, like who are the folks that made those solutions up? The plastic bag initiative was 100% made by this like white girl or whatever. And plastic bags are about maybe like 2% of our problem on a climate level. So who is in the room when we are making these solutions on a city level? Who works at the Austin Office of Sustainability? Do any people of color work there? I can say yes, because I know that. But like, you know what I mean? That's a contention point a lot of times. And if we take it off of the city level and think about climate organizations here locally, are BIPOC like on exec boards? Do they have director level positions in those orgs? A thing to consider. Sustainable buildings being classist and therefore racist. An example, we have this very, very, very cute building called the Austin Public Library downtown. It is like the pinnacle in our city so far as sustainable buildings go. There's so much glass. It doesn't use very much energy at all, but you have to pay to park there, number one. That is the only library in Austin that you have to pay to park at. Parking is about $13 if you want to park there for like 2-ish hours. Then they very explicitly do not allow homeless people to like go in. Like if they think you are homeless, you cannot go. I saw them one time drag a homeless person out, like while I was studying there. So it's just like, when you make these sustainable buildings, who are you thinking about when you think about who gets to access that building? Also, it's a lot of very like aesthetically pleasing structures that are inaccessible in that building specifically. So just more and more barriers for Black and Indigenous people of color as far as even accessing these solutions. Yeah, I think it's probably even more than what we're thinking about here. But yeah, being like collectively gaslit by a city, a state, a country, and then also having all of these different like access points to the better solution, quote unquote, for climate change feels hard. But I want to pose another question. How do you feel like, what are we doing on time? Hold on. Okay, 1:06. Oh, great. How do we feel like existing solutions to the climate change crisis can be made more equitable? It's like a little bit of a typo. But yeah, how can we make the current solutions more equitable? Oh, I didn't know that. You need to have an address to get a library card. I didn't know that. But further inaccessibility. But what are we thinking, y'all? Cool. Luckily, I have a list that I made. Let me look at the chat. More resources into improving public transit. I 100% agree. We need to invest more resources in our public transit system in general, I would say, on a city level. Hiring more folks, creating more routes, having more buses, all the things. But here are a couple of solutions that I just like thought about. So hopefully that can like juice our brains a little bit. So ask by POC and the community at large what they want before designing sustainability plans. We are experts of our own experience. You don't necessarily have to bring in outside experts. You could really just talk to the community and be like, well, dude, like the HEB is like 10 miles away. That's why I don't go. Or like, I don't know how to garden. That's why I don't make my own food, or like whatever. But actually talking to people, what a concept, you know? Always keep lines of communication open with BioPOC, because needs may change as lives change. And folks may have questions, and you should be open if we're making a climate equitable society to those questions, and not thinking that people are lesser than because they have questions. Evaluate on a regular basis and include community and BioPOC in that evaluation process. So currently, very newly, the city sustainability plan, the first one was put in place in 2015. The second one's being put in place in 2020, and they foresee like reevaluating it and rebuilding it every 5 years. So on a business level, if we're working in nonprofit organizations and like even organizations trying to be more climate conscious, reevaluating, not just being like, hey, this is the solution, and keeping that solution in place for 20 years, because people change, circumstances change. COVID was not a thing 3 months ago. Let's just think about that, you know? Special programs for BioPOC owned businesses. For example, I wouldn't, if I owned like a small business, like very transparently, I would not like try to rebuild it to make it sustainable, because that shit is expensive. So like providing discounts for those kinds of things, providing folks with resources to, if they don't have the means to rebuild their whole building or whatever, like giving them resources to do small things. Like, okay, instead of fluorescents here, you could put natural lights or something, you know? Outreach efforts specific for BioPOC, like going out into those communities and talking to people, and not just having them, you know, at the city building, or not just having them on West Austin or whatever, or South Austin, like having outreach folks specific to the communities we wish to serve. Accessible climate education. These things can be so jargony. I've been trying my best not to be jargony with y'all, but please like call me out if I have been. But like when talking about climate, I even sometimes get very like intimidated, because I feel like I don't know all of the words. So having that education be more accessible, and more accessible at a young age also. Like I didn't know shit about climate change until like later in life. So having that, you know, implemented into some curriculum as a younger person would have been cool. So just something to think about. And compensating BioPOC for their labor in building. These things don't just like go into the community, ask the community for things and then leave. Like people need to be compensated for the expertise that they are bringing to the table. The expertise being their own lives. Putting information in different languages, absolutely. Not just English and Spanish. Those are not the only languages that exist. Those are the most popular languages spoken in Austin, but absolutely. When possible, like having ASL interpreters, even at your climate events. That shit is expensive, not gonna lie. But if you have the means to do it, which a lot of organizations do, then you should. And then challenging and discarding white supremacy culture. Because white supremacy has been a thing for so long, it's become like a part of our culture. And I have an outside resource here that talks at length about what white supremacy culture is and how we can like dismantle it in our workplaces, in our everyday lives, so on and so forth. Looking at the chat again, very briefly. Okay, fine. Oh no, that's not cool. Apparently You can pay a fine to avoid having to put in sidewalks. No, you should definitely like make all of your like climate structures physically accessible. That's not always the case, but or like all structures in general should be physically accessible. But like loopholes like that, I wouldn't be surprised if Austin also had that. Yeah, even like incentives on a business level for folks to be more sustainable and building their structures could be cool. Absolutely. But is there anything else that I'm forgetting as far as like this goes? If you think of it later, totally tell me later. But I want to ask y'all, and this is probably like the last question I'll ask before we get into writing, but how can our businesses, workplaces, institutions be more climate equitable? Not climate conscious, climate equitable. And how can we as individuals be more climate equitable? What do you think? Idea off the top of my head. Maybe considering advocating for some of the things that we talked about as far as equity goes to folks in power that can like change it on a policy level would be a way that I would like to be more climate equitable in like a business context. Yeah, being more climate equitable with your dollar. So like if you know that certain organizations are not thinking about equity when they're thinking about climate, divesting your money into organizations that are. PODER, which is one that I keep bringing up, is one. Urban Roots, another one that I'm thinking of. So like divesting our money into folks that are thinking about climate and also thinking about like intersections of climate and communities of color. Yeah, absolutely. So speaking up for people who maybe would be put, you know, at risk if they do, you know, speak up about these things, being an amplifier, empowering folks to know that they have knowledge on these things. You don't have to be a climate expert. You don't have to have a degree in environmental justice or whatever to know that like race and climate are intertwined.
Yeah. As like an educator too, like for me, I like just think that also like you were saying earlier, making the language more accessible and like working with young kids, like hoping to talk more about climate, but like really how like, yeah, how it's very like how it's overlapped on top of like race and also health, and like in our city, it's really present in a real way. I mean, as it is across the globe, really. And then yeah, also like pulling it into like the equity conversation into the overarching discussion, because like also as part of like an environmental organization, it's like within that sort of community, it's not really been talked about. And when it is talked about, when climate's talked about, it's like race is not really pulled in. And so yeah, just being like an advocate, I suppose, and bringing attention to that.
Absolutely. I didn't mean to do that just yet. Yeah, absolutely. When we're thinking about climate, being like, okay, how does this impact communities of color? Like straight up saying that when folks are talking about climate, because I don't think it's always an innate thing to link the two. Absolutely. And sharing this little PowerPoint that you got from KB, you know, would be great as well. Continuing, because I don't even know all the things, and I also like very much condensed this PowerPoint to make sure that it fit within 2 hours. So if you want to like know more, I definitely have more information to give you. But I want to give space. Thank y'all so much for putting up with me talking for so long. Now I want y'all to write, which is my fave thing. I have a couple of prompts that you can choose from. I love, giving folks choices. So what would a climate equitable Austin look like? What things would have to change for us to get there? What would the people, land, water, buildings, transportation, conversations, cross-identity interactions, politics, etc. look like? Be sure to pay attention to the 5 senses if you choose to use this prompt. With the definition of climate change in mind, write about an experience that you've had where climate change was a factor in it. That could be like waking up in Texas and it being fucking 90 degrees at 6 a.m. That could be, waiting on public transit, one day and it like never comes. That could be like so many different things now that we kind of know how it shows up in the world. Or that could be like reading yet another article about ice melting, at the bottom of the sea or whatever. Third option I wanted to give y'all is write your own personal history of Austin. What do you feel like the culture of Austin is? If you could rewrite the climate and racial history, what would be different? Again, be sure to tap into your 5 senses with this prompt. So yeah, that gives us like, what time is it? 1:20, 1:50. That gives us like 30 minutes to write our little hearts out. So I want to go ahead and start. I don't know if y'all are like averse, but when I'm writing, I like to put on like chill beats, which is this YouTube page or whatever to listen to. So I'm happy to put that in the background, but if it'll be like distracting, I can also not. But okay, cool, y'all. Let's write for a little bit.
Good to see you. Yeah, hey, what's with the polka dots? What do you mean? Polka dots are out. It's
OMG, sorry y'all to disrupt. I just thought of another prompt that I did in a 5th and 6th grade class recently, and it actually yielded a lot of very interesting results. If the climate change crisis continues to progress in the way that it is, what are we going to look like in like 20 years? What is the world gonna look like in like 20 years? I did this, and this 5th grader had this very interesting like essay about, the FDA regulated that as soon as we are born, we lose our sense of smell because everything is so polluted. It was so interesting. So that's an optional 4th prompt. If we continue the way that we are, what do you feel like the world will look like in 20 years? But cool. I'm gonna go ahead and add that to the PowerPoint as well. Okay, y'all. I'm gonna go ahead and stop, out of the interest of time. Please culminate your stanzas, stop your sentences for now, not forever. But I'd love to know, I'm not gonna force y'all to share or whatever, because I know these are very new ideas and thoughts. But I want to just know like how that felt for y'all, if anything. I was also writing alongside y'all, and that felt very cathartic for me. I don't know. I got to kind of like write myself a new world for a second. But how are we feeling? How did that writing exercise feel?
I had done number 3. Kind of made my own little twist from the prompt, but it kind of felt good to get like, as I was reading the prompt, like my feelings and thoughts come up, and then like putting words to them, and then getting those words onto paper, and then also having that process of like, nah, that word doesn't work, scratching it out and writing it again, and having this like, well, for me specifically, this like bilingual piece, because I'm like, that word doesn't really translate to English, so I'm gonna leave it in Spanish and vice versa. So that did feel good.
Yay! Happy to hear it. Anyone else want to speak to how that felt? Or even bravely share if they want.
I'll share a little bit. I did prompt 2, and sort of like, I've been thinking a lot about climate change and like the terms of why so many people from my own community are like in denial about it. And so I've been thinking a lot about how like there's a discrepancy between what our senses tell us as someone growing up in like Westlake, Louisiana, and then how that information gets processed. So it's like you see the towers of like PPG and Sasol right next to the water that we're all drinking. Like all of us can see that, and we can smell the fumes. But like whenever that is your source of water, and whenever this is where your family lives, and this is the job that you have to work at, it's like a lot easier and a lot safer for a lot of people to be in denial about these very real dangers, right? And so I think that like climate deniers sort of get written off as like uneducated or stupid, or they just don't know what's going on. But I think it's like this like existential threat, you know, that's too terrifying for people to really wrap their heads around. It's not that they don't know. It's that to admit that this is, you know, going to kill your family is like too frightening. And I don't like blame them, even though I do get frustrated with them. And I think that's like happening with the pandemic too, but yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about there, but thank you so much. Anybody, maybe like one other person want to talk about how that felt / share a little bit about their piece?
I could say one thing, but only if nobody else wants to.
Go ahead. We want to hear from you.
Okay. I was working on the 4th one, and it's nowhere near as well thought out as what the last person said. But the one that I put down things for different senses, but the one that I was thinking about the most was for the hearing. I was thinking about cicadas, because to me cicadas represent summer, like the sound of cicadas. And I thought with climate change we'll probably lose that at some point. And I just thought about how I've lived in 2 completely different sides of the world, and cicadas have always been a constant. And I thought about how there's going to be a generation, much like how people are already not growing up with fireflies and other things that some of us think of as normal, there's going to be entire groups of people who might not have that, what's to me a very strong sense memory of summer, and how that ties into hearing cicadas, and how there are all these things that are just what life is supposed to be like to me. That's probably because I was privileged enough to live with the world being the way it was, and live in places with nature. But yeah, basically.
Ooh, very interested in this cicada piece that you're working on for sure. Gabby, were you gonna say anything?
I was just gonna say, I think, I don't know, thinking about kind of like what Liz said, as well as like, it can be really hard to talk about sometimes, especially like talking about it in terms of equity. Cause I was thinking about how like working with kids all over the city, it's like kids on one side of the city, their like land that they are in and like the water near them has been deemed like sort of disposable in a way. And by default, then it's like, I mean, if you like map like health on Austin too, right? It's like, how do you tell a child that they've been basically just like, yeah, allowed to be in an area where they're like they're probably gonna get sick. Like that's just like the how the city is built. Like some people, you're going to have that health impact versus another. And so with climate, it's like everything just is exacerbated. But yeah, it's like hard to communicate that, like, someone somewhere made a choice once upon a time. Yeah, to basically just like, I don't know, put people through things. Sorry, not very thought out, but what I'm thinking about.
All thoughts are good thoughts. We're doing great. We're thinking critically, which is beautiful to me as a facilitator, and always the goal. Well, y'all, we've reached the end of the road, Boys to Men version. So I just want to give y'all a couple of parting gifts, if I can. Couple things, which I put in the notes so I could not forget to pop them in the chat. Again, this is a project through the Artist on series. At least our first iteration of it is a project through the Office of Sustainability as a community climate ambassador. If y'all want to like look at some of the programs that they have, any of the resources that they have, they're all accessible on their webpage here, which I'll put the link in our chat, as well as they have like regular workshops that they do through their center as well. This is the first iteration of our Artists on Climate Change and Sustainability series. Our next one being with Althea. She's going to talk about where cybersecurity meets climate justice. If you want to continue coming to our stuff, I definitely would suggest it. That's going to be like a really cool talk about direct action. And if you're techie at all, which I am not, but I'm still going just because it sounds cool. Then we have Ona talking about Black eco-poetics, our relationship to food and ways to get reconnected to the land. The following week after that, we have Soups talking about food. Amazing. Buzzwords around food, accessibility to food in Austin, all the cool things. And then we have Felita Hicks talking about sexuality, incarceration, and artistry, and how all of those are impacted by the climate crisis. And that's going to be a very poetry-focused workshop. Then we're going to have a panel. We also have another program called our Artist Showcase and Open Mic coming up on the 13th of May. Yay, exciting. And then if you want to keep up with any of those things, as you saw, they're all just like screenshots from our Facebook, facebook.com/ATXinterfaces is where you can find us. We also are about to have this newsletter with blog posts from folks in the community, as well as co-organizers, and similar events to this one and others happening in the community, things that like Ella layer artistry and social justice, and we're gonna just like put all of that into a newsletter, as well as have this cutesy like artist of the month feature with the local artists doing some real cool stuff. So if you're interested in that, please consider signing up for our newsletter through the link I put in the chat. Also consider following us on Instagram and Twitter, and supporting us via the dollar if you can. If you can't, I've just given you so many other ways also to support our cause. Also, I want to pop in just my email. I'm like, my favorite thing in the world is to see like talk to folks that I've like done workshops with, and they like send me like, oh shit, here's my draft of like what happened in the workshop if we didn't get to go to it, or if you want access to this PowerPoint, please just like send me an email and I'll send you back the PowerPoint. I'm also like really hoping, knock on wood, that we can like make a zine out of all of the workshop like culminations of these things, which we'll probably put out a notice for like at the very end. But yeah, absolutely, all of the things. But does anyone have any parting questions, feelings, as these pugs are asking in this GIF?
I had like a question that I wanted your thoughts on. Like if you have a second to speak to this. I've been like seeing a lot of like sort of eco-fascist stuff popping up, like we are the virus kind of thing, because people are like talking about how rivers are clearing up. Like how do we like sort of combat that? Because it's like hard to talk about in a way that I think people understand why those posts are a problem sometimes. Like even the word ecofascism is like so like kind of high-minded, but like, do you have thoughts?
It's a couple of different answers to that question. But I usually go to the like first assessing like whether this person is ready to like receive information at all. Cause like, especially on the internet, people are just like posting stuff to get a reaction. And I'm not a person that goes like back and forth with people on the internet. Cause it's like, you're committed to like, you know, not hearing my viewpoint. So like, I don't feel like this is worth it. But if folks are genuinely open to like longer dialogue, then I'll partake in that through things like infographics, which are like very digestible information that you can get literally at any corner of the internet. Listening to folks that are already doing that work, because definitely is folks like talking about ecofascism on the internet, things like YouTube. So doing like small digestible videos that you could send to people is helpful as well. Also just like, I don't know, asking the follow-up questions, because questions feel a lot less threatening to people. So it's just like, have you considered this or whatever instead? Or have you considered the broader impact of like what you post on social media or whatever? Questions rather than you're wrong feels like more inviting in my experience. But it is after 2 and I want to be respectful of y'all's time. So I'll go ahead and end here. But y'all, this has been mad cute. Let's do it again sometimes, aka next week, if y'all want to, but it'll just be a different person presenting. But y'all try to have a good rest of your day, and I hope to see y'all at another workshop. I hope to see y'all in life talking up all the climate things. But cool. See you later. Bye.